This is Stuart Smith with the Georgia Lacrosse Officials Association. This evening, Andy Halpern and I gave a presentation on officiating in transition as part of our association's 2021 spring training. Andy and I are both U.S. lacrosse certified trainers, and we've both been officiating lacrosse for well over 10 years. We also officiate both high school and college lacrosse. I've often said that the more I learn, the more I realize how much I really don't know. This is true professionally as well as in my career as a lacrosse official. Throughout the presentation we did this evening, we encouraged the group to ask questions, make comments, so you'll hear that dialogue regularly. To begin, we want to define our terms and ask, what do we mean by transition? Essentially, this is any time teams are not in a settled situation with the offense in possession of the ball, running plays, and trying to score goals. Basically, whenever the ball is moving from one end of the field to the other, we're in transition as officials. Now, we'll continue this with our recorded presentation.
All
There
right.
we go.
Okay. All right. So again, like I said, half your officiating time is going to be spent in transition. So it's all those different dynamic situations. I don't know. Any other thoughts on this, Andy? When are we in transition?
I think, along with all of those that are major points, have to consider game time, end of the period, when somebody may be running out of time, whether it's off the clock and it's settled, or it may be coming off of a penalty and they're either trying to kill that penalty or run that out, or, on the flip side, take the best advantage that they can out of their, dwindling man up situation, are two other things that come to mind, that I put along with that.
Okay. Yeah. Good points there. So, couple other things to think about just in general. You want to focus on your responsibilities, but anticipate where you're going to be next. And this is something that we often tell some of the newer officials. This once you get the muscle memory of the back and forth, it becomes second nature. But until you get there, one of the things that I will say is wherever you are, just think, okay, if this happens, if we transition, where do I need to go next? And just focus on keep that in the back of your mind, because you're split between officiating the game and then the mechanics of officiating. So think about anticipation. We're going to talk a bit more about that. A couple other things. Get to know the teams. And this is a good pregame topic. A lot of times, particularly later in the season, I'll go look at some of the stats websites and I'll see where are these two teams stacked up. If I'm not that familiar with them, or maybe it's a non-region game, maybe I'm familiar with one of the teams but not the other. I want to see, what's their record look like? Are they a really good team? Are they a not so good team? That's going to affect how you think about transition. How good is the goalie? Goalies that have high save percentages typically mean they're good. We're going to be doing a lot more running back and forth. Somebody takes a shot, you get a higher chance of a save. That's going to equal more transition time. Think about how the teams are running their offense. You may not know that initially at the beginning of the game, but you'll be able to develop a sense of that as the game goes on. I will say this is something that I really am impressed about Andy, because we haven't reffed a lot in the last couple of years, but I know, Andy, you are a student of the game, not just from the officiating side, but from the lacrosse side. And this guy's an encyclopedia when it comes to the teams and the players. And, we'll get out on the field and he'll be like, oh yeah, number 47 there at Marist, he's, a top contender. He had, 28 shots the last game and a 50%, what I'm like, dude, how do you know all this stuff? So sometimes your partner can help. They may be very familiar with the teams. How do they run their offenses? Do they typically do slow clears? Do they try to get the faster clears? Are they big on fast breaks? and you guys know this as well, even if the offense tends to be a little bit slower, if there's a turnover at midfield, there's probably a high probability that we're going to have some sort of fast break situation. So that's going to affect how you think about it and how you're going to react in transition. Same thing with the defense. How is the team running their defense? Are they typically a zone? Do they typically play man to man? Do they double team? Do they double team the shooters? Try to lock them off? Do they play soft or aggressive? Those tend to either result in longer settled situations or a higher chance that you're going to have more transition during the game. And then, of course, we kind of talked about this before, but is the team behind? Are they looking to shoot? Well, we know if you've got shooters, but you've got a good goalie, you've got a higher chance that you're going to probably have some transitions. So I don't know. Any other thoughts on this, Andy, as far as things to think about?
I think the best thing in any of this is the anticipation part, and all the best thing you can do in order to put yourself in a position to anticipate the best is get the most information and most preparation that you can possible. We're going to talk in a second about consultation with coaches in a pregame. I think it's also understanding what the matchup is, what's on the line. It's also knowing, if a team has just played 1 or 2 days before, or if they've had 2 weeks off, say after spring break. Are they looking to really go and get after it, or are they looking to cool their heels a little bit? In any given matchup.
Yeah.
Those are just, all things that come to mind.
No, those are good points. So you mentioned this, your transition strategy should be part of the pregame. So if you're the R on the game, you should probably be talking with your crew about it. If you're not the R, you might want to ask, "Hey, boss, hey, Andy, what do you think about the transition here? How do you want to handle this? What are your thoughts on how the R or the crew should approach this from a pregame perspective?" We want to talk about and remind each other of our various responsibilities: lead, trail, single, and we'll talk a little bit about this bit more. What are the likely outcomes of the game? If I'm reffing Lovett versus Stars Mill, probably going to be a pretty good game. But if I'm doing Westminster against Grady, probably a little bit different kind of game. Don't tell John Oshner I said that.
I was about to say, rest in peace, John Oshner.
So, what are the likely outcomes of the game? I think one of the things that I like is to talk to coaches about this. Andy, what are your thoughts on this? Because I know that you do this a fair amount. You talk to the coaches about not just, "Coach, you certify your players are equipped by rule," but you get in a conversation. You're trying to draw out information. So what are your thoughts there?
I think it's an invaluable time to talk to and engage coaches. Obviously for the points that we're speaking about right now for transition, but also to develop a rapport with them and establish a dialogue where they know that they can have a conversation with you prior to the game.
Mm-hmm.
And it's I think it's one of the most valuable things that we can is as a part of that pregame conversation, not just saying, "Coach, you certify your players are equipped to play by rule," and then walk off and ask for captain's numbers and and just go from there. It's ask them if they have a strategy for the day. I think one of the biggest questions that I ask coaches, more frequently than not, is to ask them, "What are you thinking about the other team?
Mm-hmm.
How are you guys going to play this today? What do you think about them?" And that invites them to open the book on what they have already done as a coach to prepare, because they're professionals for a reason and what they do, and They didn't just get off the bus and say, we're going to roll the ball out and we're going to play some lacrosse today, especially at the varsity level or anything above. They have put in a good deal of care and preparation into that individual game, and they know what they're going to do. And that's for them, that's for their staff, that's for their players across the board. And so if you try and include yourself along with those coaches, assistant coaches, players, whatnot, in that preparation prior to the start of the game, then you're getting included into that conversation, and they're able to tell you what they may or may not be looking to do. And also there have been plenty of times in my experience where you initiate that conversation with a coach and it ends up with them talking about stalling, where they say that they're going to employ a certain defensive strategy in order to try and draw a stalling call against their opponent, where they may try and play a zone and then draw a stalling call against their opponent, or slow them down, or cut off transition, or try and limit man up or man down opportunities by using a jump play or a double or something that's a little bit unorthodox.
Yeah. I think the good point there is like you said, it opens up the dialogue, which again, way beyond transition, but it makes us approachable as officials. And I think coaches definitely appreciate that.
Yep, absolutely. No, I agree.
So let's talk a little bit about some of the responsibilities. So if it's a two-man crew, you guys have heard this before: lead sprints, trail jogs. The lead has got to stay ahead of the play. Of course, the trail is going to stay with or slightly behind the play. The key point here is you have to trust your partner has his area of coverage. And this is something that you get better at as you ref with different officials. You're going to kind of gauge their level of, particularly for the R, you want to make sure you understand your partner's level of experience. If I'm reffing with Andy in a 2-man game or a 3-man game, I'm not paying a bit of attention to what's in his area. I don't have to. I know he's got it 100%. If Nick is reffing with me back at Woodward back in 2007, he was watching everything on my side of the field because I didn't know what I was doing. But when I'm reffing with Nick now, we trust each other. We know, hey, Stewart's got his half, Nick's got his half. Don't have to worry about it. Okay. So that's again, this is kind of a tip for the R is trust your partner, but also get to know what his level of experience is. Here's another really important thing. And this is just like you guys have heard this. It's beaten to your heads. Hopefully trail watches the shooter, trail watches the shooter. But this concept applies as well on those long outlet passes. Goalie makes the save. He yells clear. Everybody scatters. And then what does he do? He throws the ball down the field. Stay with that passer, whether it's the goalie or another player, particularly if that ball is leaving your zone, is leaving your area of the coverage. Stay with that guy and watch for those late hits. Watch for that, that off-ball activity that happens after the pass. And here's a tip. I mean, you guys know there's that pass, and then the guy gets blown up. We got a flag. It could be unnecessary roughness, illegal body check, whatever. But here's a little tip for you. What happens if you have some of activity after that pass and you don't think it warrants an illegal body check or unnecessary roughness? Well, what can you do? Well, here's a tip that I learned. Call a play on for interference. It does two things. One, if that pass is not caught, you can blow your whistle, kill the play, and give it back to the offense. But it also sets the tone. It lets that defender know, hey, I'm watching you, buddy. I saw that hit. I saw that little push. It knocked the guy down. It wasn't hard enough to warrant a flag, but it is a technical foul, and I'm calling it. And if you need to ramp it up from there, you can. So little tip there. But the point is, you've got to be watching that off ball after the pass kind of activity. Couple other things
Can I add something to that?
Yeah, absolutely. Go ahead.
I just wanted to add one thing. I think those are fantastic points, and especially when we're talking about two-man, people and in transition, people sometimes get over concerned about transitioning up the field and taking all of those, say, offsides or other secondary violations. And I know that we're going to talk more about the Bermuda Triangle later in this presentation. But one thing that I learned from Mike Culver several years ago was
Thank you.
to add a cherry on top to that tip about you calling a play on for off-ball interference or anything else behind the play, which we need to be more concerned about than offsides or any other technical foul, but it being a late hit or something of the like, because we're always concerned with personal safety, as a primary. But if you do call a play on and you're the trail official that has the 20-second timer, at least for us in high school, is that play on warrants a new timer. That needs to be a reset because it's this, you have to treat it as the same as if you had killed the play dead and administered that play on. That would be a new clearing count or a new 10-second count on the offensive side of the field. And the play on, even though we don't have the same administration, the play on still warrants the exact same thing, which is a new timer, a new clearing count for us. And especially as the trail have to be cognizant of that.
Yeah, no, that's a really good point. All right, a couple other thoughts about two-man. You guys have heard this before. It's a one-man game until the trail is in position. So if you're that lead coming down, you got to keep that in mind. You got a lot of stuff that you're going to have to cover at your half of the field until your partner, your trail, gets down to the other end of the field. Change of possession. Your first move as that new lead, your trail, you're in a settled situation, ball drops, we got to change of possession. You've got to get to the cone. Now, which cone you go to, we'll talk about that in a minute. That's also a phrase we use when we describe single, but we'll get to that in a minute when we do three-man. You do need to stay as the lead. You need to stay a zone ahead of the ball. And you guys know we break the field up. Are you talking to me? Yeah, if so, I don't know who's not on mute, but again, please mute yourself. We're getting a lot of background noise there. You guys know this as well. Coming down, the lead has the initial 10 count, and we'll talk about the count responsibilities when we talk about three-man in a second. So, what does this look like? So, we're in a settled situation. We've got lead and trail. There's a shot. There's a save. The goalie yells clear. What's the first thing that happens? Our positions change. The trail becomes the lead becomes the trail. And then the first thing the new lead needs to do is he needs to get to that midfield cone. Now, depending on how fast that clear is going to dictate how long you stay there. But you always want to stay at least one zone ahead. So this area back here being zone one, this in the midfield here above the goal line, above the box is zone two. Well, I want to stay at least a zone ahead of the ball. As that ball transitions up, the trail again is going to stay slightly behind or with the play, but the lead has got to beat the ball down. So he's going to get down to goal line extended, and then the trail is going to follow down. So pretty basic stuff there, but again, something to keep in mind about this. You always want to make sure you're beating the ball to the goal. Now, here's another situation, and I stole this from Greg Height's two-man training presentation. This gives you an idea of a transition off a shot and save, similar kind of thing. So our direction of play is to the left. There's a shot. Goalie's going to make the save. We're going to go the other way. All right, so the new trail has the 4-second count and the 20 count. The new lead, his main responsibility is get to the goal at the other end. He's going to go to the cone. He's going to check for that quick offsides, hold midfield until you're sure that team is going to clear. And then you've got to stay ahead of the ball. So that's the main responsibility as a lead is you got to remember you need to stay ahead of the ball. You do not want to get beat to the goal. You guys have heard the expression, you can make the right call and you can make the wrong call and be in position and nobody will argue with you. But if you make the right call and you're out of position, nobody's going to agree with you. So if you're at the top of the box and you got beat and there's a shot and it zooms past the goal and the goalie and goes out of bounds and there's three guys back there, how are you possibly going to know who is closest to the end line if you're up at the top of the box? So you've got to be able to beat the ball and get down at least to goal line extended so you can make those calls. And of course, as we said before, the trail, he's going to come up. His job will then be check for secondary offsides, and then he's going to slide down into his position as the new trail. So any questions, comments, anything else you guys were wondering here? Again, this is two-man transition.
Yes, to say, Nick, just one thing on the comment about being out of position as the lead and the ball going to the end line. And you said, how can you tell who's closest to the end line? Wouldn't it be who's closest to the ball when it crosses the end line?
Yeah, you're right. You technically, who is closest to the point where the ball went out of bounds when it went out of bounds. Yeah.
Okay. Just a point of clarification.
Yeah. No, you're absolutely correct, sir.
Okay. Thank you.
Yep. All right. So let's talk a little bit about three-man. Similar concepts. We talked about it before. The lead sprints, the trail jogs. What does a single do? Well, in transition, the singles also got to get to that midfield cone. A few years ago, I had an opportunity to do one of the U.S. Lacrosse Laredo three-man training, and that was absolutely hammered into us, is get to the cone, get to the cone, get to the cone. As soon as there's a transition, the single sprints to the cone, that midfield, far side midfield cone. And then the other key thing about the single is you're going to follow the play once the ball crosses midfield. Well, if you've got a slow clear, you're probably going to be able to pause at midfield, do some count, look for some offsides, take a breath for a minute, and wait for that ball to pass you, and then you're going to follow it in. But there's a lot of times as single where the ball's gone, I'm sprinting 80 yards from, my position is single on one end of the field all the way down to the other end of the field. So you're just going to blow right across midfield and you're just going to keep going. So again, that whether you stop or not at midfield is going to be dictated by what the play looks like. And again, as in two-man, the trail is going to stay with or slightly behind the play. Now, the difference on counts, as you guys probably know, the trail has the 4-second count on the goalie, but the single has the 10 and 20-second counts. So there's a bit of a muscle memory here, and I know I still probably do this when I do two-man lacrosse. I flip my timer on almost every time because I'm either the single or I'm the trail, and I just flip it on out of habit. But again, by rule or by mechanic anyway, the single has that 20-second count. I say if you're the trail and you flip your timer on, no harm, no foul. Just make sure you turn it off because you don't want two timers going off, particularly at different times. If you flip yours on a second or two before the single does, that's going to confuse. And you're also bench side too, so that's something to keep in mind. Probably not, probably a good thing to remember there. So what does this look like from kind of a big field perspective? So this is our triangle. So you've got our benches over there on the side, the table there, and our direction of play is to the right. Well, you've got the trail, the single, and you see the lead, and we've got a really nice, big, wide triangle. And you see here, I think the ball, it's hard to see it in this picture. I think the ball is probably right here in the middle of the field. Everybody is in a really good position. You've got the single is running up. He's about to cross midfield. If the ball's here, it's probably going right past midfield. But you notice the lead. He's all the way down here. He's all the way or already almost at goal line extended, well ahead of the play. This is exactly what you're looking for in a three-man game, because you want to have that nice wide triangle, but you also want to make sure that the lead is covering his goal. Little animation here. So, we've got a similar kind of thing. There's a shot, a clear. Well, the first thing that happens is the lead and trail's responsibilities change. Single stays the same. Lead is going to beat feet down to his goal. Single's going to get to midfield. So he can watch the initial offsides. The ball comes up. Single goes down, following the ball. And then this is where in three-man, you've got a bit of an advantage as the trail. You can afford to hang out and come up a little bit slower. Typically as trail, I'm going to go to the bottom wing line. And I'm going to sit there and wait. Now here's a question, Andy. If I'm sitting there at the wing, what am I waiting for? What am I doing there as trail?
No, I think, to me, the first thing that I think of, one, I'm looking for secondary offsides, illegal substitution, and any off ball back and forth between a previously riding attackman and a previously covering defenseman. But along with those, I think that what I think is most valuable about that position as a slow trail is that it gives you an opportunity to have a conversation with a coach from either side of the field, to hopefully continue that conversation that you've already established in the pregame that we talked about earlier, and continue that dialogue and that rapport with them. And a lot of the time, it certainly doesn't mean that they have to be right or even have, a reason to talk about anything, but they want to be heard. And this gives you an opportunity to engage with the benches, to talk to either coach, and them just to be heard. And we just talked about two-man. We have two-man at the other end of the field right now between lead and single side. We have the field covered, not as well as we'd like. That's why we have three men. But with that third guy hanging back, we have an opportunity to engage with one bench and hear what they have to say, to echo any of their concerns, to try and clean up any issues that we may have. It gives us a great opportunity to clear the box as well before that trail position swings up to the next cone, to the front cone, the one that's closest to the on-ball side, before he slides into position. And he's really I really think of the trail in that position as almost is the janitor of everything that we have going on during the course of the game. He cleans up the benches, he can clean up the box, can clean up the offsides, any other residual issues that we have between a riding attackman and an opposing defender. That's all on him, and that's his ability. And he can do that and take care of those duties while still knowing that the field is covered by the lead and single on the ensuing play on the other side.
All right. Those are excellent points, and all done in 10 seconds or less, because, maybe you might actually be transitioning back the other way, but no, those are good points. And you may have a bit of time before you need to transition down to your new, slot in the settled situation. One thing you will often hear is as the trail, as you move through that area, do not walk. All right. Whoops. You don't want to walk in that area. That's a no man's land. One, it looks bad if you're walking because you're right in front of the coaches. So you want to do at least a nice TV jog. All right. So anticipating transition. This is probably a key part of this whole presentation, because we're talking about what you need to do, where you need to go, what you need to think about. Well, when do you actually need to do this stuff? When do you need to beat feet to the other end of the field, particularly as the new lead? Going the wrong way here. So ball drops on the ground. You as the trail need to start to back up. Now, you may not turn around and run to the other end of the field, but you're going to start backing up towards midfield. What if there's a defensive double team? and that offensive player might lose the ball. As the trail, if I see somebody double teamed and he's not immediately passing, I'm probably going to start to back up a little bit. What about, and this is a very much a game specific situation. You've got that kid who's he's the shooter. He's every time he gets the ball, he's trying to score a goal, but he's not hitting the corners. He's hitting the goalie and the chest protector 9 out of his last 10 shots. When that kid starts to wind up, if I've seen this 4, 5, 6, 8 times in a game, I might start to back up. So those are a couple things come to mind, but I don't know. What are some other situations that you can think of, Andy? And while you're talking, I'm going to step away for just a second because I got a dog that desperately needs to go out. So go ahead. What are some other situations you could think of?
Well, I was going to say, Trey just messaged me and brought up a great situation about being aware of both the period as well as the game situation and the anticipation of a timeout, which I think is crucial. We were just talking about trail positioning, especially if you're coming up. We talked about, engaging a coach or having an opportunity to clean up the box. Or check a penalty time or anything of the like that's on the bench side that is like essentially a secondary responsibility. Trey just brought this up to me in a message. You can swing right in front of a coach and, they may be man down and be wanting to try and run out some penalty time or get some personnel on the field. Or it may be 6-on-6 and they're trying to sub in their defensive personnel and try and cut off transition. And there's an opportunity where you can be right in front of a coach and be ready for a timeout that may be highly contested. It may be somebody that is, they may be down to their last timeout of the game or of the half, or it may be something that they're really going to try and hotly contest, and it may be a 50-50 ground ball. And if you're in position to swing around in front of them and hear it as soon as they call it, it's something that you can deliver when and where they have possession and be definitive about it. That's just one thing off the top of my head.
All right, good deal. So let's talk about another concept here. Greg Height likes to call this the Bermuda Triangle, where flags disappear forever. So what do we mean when we say the Bermuda Triangle? Well, strictly speaking, it's probably not a triangle, but when you're in transition, you got your nice wide triangle there. We've got our lead, trail, and single. Well, the trail is generally going to have pretty much everything at his end of the field. If you're at goal line extended and you're coming up behind the play, you've got good coverage of everything around the crease, in the box, probably at least to the far alley. You've got the near side alley and most of the way up towards midfield. The lead, he's at the other end of the field. He's got basically the same area of coverage. He might not be able to see everything in that far alley. And he's going to see he's got most things up, up to and approaching midfield. Of course, the single, a little bit of overlap in some of these areas. This is not a hard and fast rule. It's not like we can, in 2-man, we sort of divide the field diagonally. This is a little bit blurry, but the single's going to have things generally in his area right there on the far side, probably covering the alleys. He can see things there, out of bounds, certainly, and the alleys, those types of things. But what about this area in the middle of the field? We tend to call that the Bermuda Triangle. It's not anybody's, and it's not really a triangle, obviously. It's kind of more of a rectangle, but, it's an area of the field where we don't necessarily have real good visibility. We're kind of concentrating on our areas. We're watching the transition. The single's looking for offsides primarily. The trail's looking for late hits. The lead is probably still running down to goal line extended. He may even have his back to the midfield area, depending on how fast that transition's going. Whose flag? Who's got coverage in this area? Well, a couple things to think about here. It's probably okay to pass on some technical fouls, but you do need to call the obvious stuff, particularly things that are in front of the bench, because coaches are going to see that. So you need to make sure that you've got, particularly if it's an offsides or something like that, you want to have that flag down, or if it's on the offense and they're offside, you want to, kill it with a whistle. But my personal thinking on this is, if you see some sort of big hit, you see some sort of personal foul, and it's obvious to everybody, you got, the grandma in the upper seats of the bleachers going, ooh, because some kid got nailed. Everybody in the stadium knows it. We better have a flag. Okay. That's the big thing. And I have seen experienced crews. You may have 3 flags. There's a big hit in the middle of the field, and all 3 officials throw their flag. You may have 2 flags. That's good too. But even if you just have 1, that's fun because we got it. So don't be hesitant to throw a flag in the Bermuda Triangle thinking, oh, my partner's got it. Or he saw it and he must have passed on it because, he's more experienced than I am, or he was closer to it, or something like that. Don't necessarily assume that. I do, one quick story on this one. I was doing a 3-man game a couple years ago. I think this was probably a first or second round playoff game. It's a pretty big game. Early in the game, we had a face off. I think it was probably like the second face off of the game. I was bench side wing official. The ball squirted out, crossed the midfield, or crossed the restraining. We all yell play. And I'm tracking with this ball, and I'm watching it because it looks like it's rolling towards the sideline. So I'm going, all right, I'm about to have an out of bounds. I need to make sure I know who touched it last. Well, one of the attackmen flicks the ball up and it goes past me. And what do? I track in the ball because I'm watching, because I got to make sure that we don't have any pushes or whatever. And I think out of the corner of my eye, somebody got laid out, but I didn't see it. And nobody else threw a flag. And so we kept on playing lacrosse. Well, later I heard via Pat, one of the coach that had a kid get laid out, complained. He sent a little email and said, your guys missed a big hit early in the game. And I got an opportunity to go back and watch the game film. And sure enough, it looked like it was right in front of me. But unfortunately, I'm tracking with the ball and I'm not watching what's off to the right, and I didn't see the hit. Should my partners have thrown the flag? Maybe. I won't tell you who else was on the game because they're pretty good officials. We miss stuff. But my point is, don't assume that if you see a big hit right in front of your partner that he passed on it, especially if you know that it was late, it was high, it was obviously illegal. Now, if somebody gets knocked down on the ground and it's within 5 yards of the ball and it wasn't above the shoulders or below the waist, and didn't look, it's just somebody got knocked down. Okay, fine. But if it's late or it's obvious, you probably want to throw a flag on that. Any other thoughts on the Bermuda Triangle?
Stuart, can I say something?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, on that, just to kind of echo what Stuart is saying. One, that's a matter of knowing who your crew is a little bit. I will say this: if you're reffing with me and I miss something, and you are 100% positive that I missed it, you damn well better have a flag on it, because I will chew your ass out if we both miss it. Now, that said, if it's a 3-man crew and it's behind a cage and you're the trail and you throw the flag, I will also kill you again. Because that just tells me you're looking out of position. But one, know who the crew is, and give your partner a chance to make the call. He may just be tied up in the middle. He may need to get out of it or whatever, but give your partner a chance to make the call. But if you are 100%, you better come in and make that call. If you are only 95%, I'd rather you not guess. Some referees may say different. But at 100%, you come and make that call. At 95%, how do you know you're sure? My 2 cents worth.
Excellent. Good points. Andy, what you got?
Well, I appreciate both you and Mike sharing that. To your recollection, I remember doing a game in a state semifinal a couple of years ago, and it was the exact same situation. Coming off a face-off, and I had a first-team All-State and All-American face-off kid get apparently obliterated, and I had been focused on the ball, and it sounded horrible. It looked horrible, especially in the aftermath. But I thought at the same time that there was an opportunity for both of my other officials to have made that call, and it didn't come in. But it's just one of those situations where you have to be aware of not only your initial responsibility as an official in a certain zone or in a certain role at any given time in the game, but also be cognizant of what your partner may be responsible for and what he may or may not miss within that role. And to go along with that, I will say that to the point that you had one or two slides ago, especially when we are stretched or the wider the field gets, I think the wider that our gaze individually needs to be, that we need to open up more. I know that we are driving home points right now about getting to certain positions, like first cone as a trail, or getting to the single side cone, or getting to the goal line as the lead. But the further that the field gets stretched, I think the wider that our gaze and our responsibilities need to get.
Yeah. No, excellent points.
When that situation presents itself, because everyone is, in any one of those situations, each one of our three officials' responsibilities, we are stretched thin in that position at that time. And so we need to be able to have the most overlap that we possibly can for one another in each one of those zones, or each one of those roles, the further the field gets stretched as the play progresses.
Yep. Good point. Good point. I noticed I was kind of catching up on the chat there. JR says old school referees would say, "Don't fish in my pond." Possibly, but I think you've got an old school referee right here that says, if you're 100% sure, go fishing. So yeah, again, this is a good pregame. Mike is old school. This is a good pregame topic, particularly, and I will say this as somebody who's been around for a few years, but not nearly as long as some of the other guys on the call here. I know for a fact that sometimes you might get a little bit intimidated. I'm reffing with Mike and or A Nick or some of the other guys. I'm like, hey, these are the senior guys. Okay. I don't want to step on their, and I would say this is how I thought maybe a few years ago. I've gotten better about it. Mike and I have a good rapport. I can take an ass chewing from Mike. I've had him and I love him because you learn from him. But yeah, JR, I would say that's probably maybe a little bit old school. So just be careful that you're not coming across too hard on some of the newer officials. I won't say younger because some of you guys are a little bit older, but anyway.
Hey, Stuart, I'd like to echo something.
Yes, sir.
Oh, this is A. Nick. Mike brings up a very good point, and so does JR, which is one of the things that, we as a crew have to understand who we are in the crew and be able to say those things to the crew so that they will feel comfortable that it's possibly something that I'm 100% sure he missed that.
Yeah.
And then know that your crew will support you because you came in and saved the crew on that.
Oh, yes.
And so excellent point about helping your crew feel comfortable refereeing with each other so that we get the plays right, because that's what it is. And what you're going to say, Stuart, if I was in that game and I had that and you were opposite and threw the flag, I'd say, thank you for saving my butt.
Yeah, I would too.
Yeah,
Man,
exactly.
I totally missed that. Thanks for getting that check there. That was a good flag. All right. Over and back. You guys have been around for a few years now. This is a newer-ish rule. What, about 4 or 5 years ago, I think we had the over and back rule come in. Well, there's some important things that you need to keep in mind because again, this is a point of potential transition. If that ball does cross midfield, once the offense has gained that initial 10 seconds in the box, over and back is now a thing. And if that ball goes across midfield, guess what? We're transitioning. So this is something that you've got to make sure that we're officiating well. Obviously, it's easier in 3-man, but regardless, whether it's 2-man or 3-man, the trail has got to get to midfield. Okay. Again, this is all about anticipation. If that ball's rolling, I'm getting to midfield. Even if I'm 50% sure, 82% sure that it's not going to go across, I still want to get to midfield. All right. Because I don't want to get caught out of position. And again, I made the right call, but I wasn't in the right position. It's not going to look good, particularly when you're right in front of the bench. All right. So there's something like that. Trail's got to get to midfield. 3-man, single's got to come up and help. Okay. And again, it's about anticipation. Trail's going to midfield. Single should be moving up as well to help out there. Obviously, you got to know who last touched the ball. But this is where your partners can help out. You got to help the trail out, particularly if he's just come down in position and all of a sudden, he's been having a conversation with the coach and he looks up and this ball's, going towards midfield. I'm going to be listening for tip, off white, off blue, whatever. Okay. If you're the non-trail, that should be a habit. If you see a tip or if it goes off the defense, help the trail out and call that so that he knows what's going on.
The most important thing is communication there.
Absolutely. Communication, very important. Typically, if I don't hear anything, I'm going to assume the offense was the last team to touch the ball. Again, this is a good topic to go over in pregame. Talk about what is your tip. Are you going to yell tip? Are you going to yell the color? Different R's are going to have different thoughts on this, but this is a good pregame topic. So what are we looking for in over and back? If we've got a possible over and back, we need to know, has the ball touched across midfield? Is anybody offsides? You know that the attackman and the defenseman will often stand up on midfield. Well, if that ball's rolling towards there, is somebody offsides? Because if they're offsides before the ball crosses, that kills that potential over and back. Were they pushed or did they step? We need to know that as well. Did they step first and then get pushed? I've seen that happen before. I see a toe over the line and then the guy falls forward. The coach is going, he was pushed. Yes, he was, but he stepped off sides before he was pushed. So now I got an offsides on, whoever it was. Remember the defense, they can bat the ball, but they cannot possess the ball. And a couple years ago, we had a rule change. You can't use your hands and feet. You can't bat the ball. You can't kick it. You can only stop it with the back of their stick to keep it from crossing. So with all these things that we're looking for, who looks for what? Well, in a 2-man, the trail is everything. Pretty much sucks. It's all on you. You got a lot to worry about. But and one thing I will say, I'll as lead, I'm 60 yards away. I'm not going to be able to do a lot of help there. But if it's an obvious push and I can tell, I may call it if my partner doesn't, if I know he's focused on something else. Maybe the ball's rolling towards the bench side and he's right there and he's watching the ball and those players. But on the far side of the field, a defenseman pushes an attackman offsides, trying to draw that offsides call. Players do cheat. If I see it, maybe I'll call that one. It's pretty rare that you would do that as a lead in a 2-man. Now in 3-man, again, we could probably have a discussion here. I think from a trails perspective, your primary responsibilities are the line and the ball, because you're going to be the one making that initial over and did it cross or not. You're going to be looking for any illegal kicking or touching. Secondarily, you're probably going to be looking for offsides as well. But this, I think, is what the single is coming up to help with. The single is looking for the offsides and any pushes. Andy, thoughts on this? Do you treat this
No,
differently? What do you think?
Well, no, I just have two thoughts about some of our previous slides on the last two. I think that it is one thing. I think it was a great point that you made that over and back enforcement and restart enforcement is an essential part of a pregame and 3-man. And when, especially with the trail, and how you're going to handle that. You talk about that the trail should immediately back out to handle the initial offsides, to handle was he pushed offsides? Did he go offsides and then was pushed? Was there a legal touch or an illegal touch of the ball that makes it eligible for over and back or not?
Mm-hmm.
But it's essential for that trail to be essentially straddling the midfield line. And not just to, I think, that primarily is to enforce whatever that violation or enforcement of that rule might be. But at the same time, by him backing out and straddling midfield line, if there's an over and back, then he's already halfway towards the position that he's going to have to be in as he transitions from lead to trail on the ensuing restart.
Yep. And that is a great point.
And has put himself in a better position to get down the field in order to cover that cage, especially if the rest of his crew, like we're talking about right here, his single side cheats up the field and is able to cover that ensuing restart.
Yep. And that's a good point.
But that all comes along with that trail, that previous trail, getting up to cover the entire midfield line and cover whatever the situation that may present itself there. And then he's already done half the work of the potential ensuing restart before it's even occurred.
Yep. No, that's a great point.
I think is invaluable.
And that goes back to, we've talked about this a couple of times. It's about anticipation of what's happening next. So if you've got an over and back, you as the trail blow it dead. The next thing you do is you're going to be sprinting down to cover your goal, because we're transitioning the other way. And remember, the single has that restart on the over and back. Now, of course, if it's 2-man, the trail's got the restart. Couple points there. We've transitioned now at the high school level down from college to these quick restarts. Okay. If a defensive player is within 5 yards, we don't tell him back up, give him 5. We blow the whistle. And if he plays the ball carrier, okay, now I got a delay. Okay. But that's a different kind of topic. So coaches are looking for those quick whistles. We want to be quick, but we don't want to be rushed. All right. Particularly in the over and back situation. Think about if you were the trail, if I'm coming up as single and there's an over and back and the guy picks the ball up and he's ready to go, and my partner has just left midfield, I may give it a second or so. I don't want to disadvantage the ball carrier, but we go when we're ready, not when the players are ready. All right. So just something to think about. And again, this is very much a game kind of specific thing. You want to be considerate of your partner. He's sprinting to his goal. All right. And I will tell you that in 100 out of 100 times, I'm going to get beat by a 17-year-old kid if we take off at the same time in a 60-yard sprint. I'm going to lose that one every time. So think about that. What's the situation of the game? Is it in the first period and the team is about to get the ball, is already up 5 goals? This is not going to affect anything. But if we're at 3 minutes left in the fourth period and it's a 1-goal game, you probably want to give them that quick whistle. So this is also.
Stuart, can I add one thing to that?
Absolutely. Go ahead.
I think you're spot on, and especially in being, quote, considerate of your new lead, that's an opportunity that while we get a coaches poll that comes in every year, and one of the biggest complaints is that is pace of play. And we have been adjusting rules for the last 5+ years in order to try and facilitate a greater pace of play. But as you said, it's not about when the player is ready, it's about when we're ready. And if we happen to be ready a second or two after them, if that means that it gives our partner a better opportunity to get in and cover his goal and be able to cover the ensuing play, then so be it. You're going to get flack from the bench, of course, because kids, especially more and more now, are being instructed and taught to pick up the ball and hold it up in the air, and it's show them that you're ready. But it's not about when they're ready; it's when we're ready. And at the same time, on that same point, an over and back situation is a very opportune time for someone to potentially put us in a position to have to make one of the new delay of game calls, where you have a restart at midfield that is blown in either prematurely by the single side or by anyone else on the crew. And it could have been held off by a second, and it would have given that opposing defender the opportunity to yield 5 yards on the ensuing restart, where we don't have to throw a flag.
Yeah.
I think that's a new rule, and with good enforcement, especially at the beginning of the season, just like any new rule, we'll hopefully clean things up. But whatever we can do in addition to that to try and prevent that situation, or putting ourselves or the rest of our crew in a position to have to make that call that is borderline at best, I think is for the better.
Yep.
And restarts at midfield following over and backs, everybody wants a quick restart, but there are times where you might be able to say, hey, the offensive player, the newly entitled offensive player is ready to go, and the defender is within 5 yards, but he's trying to make a reasonable attempt to yield that 5 yards before we have a restart. We can say that we're not ready to restart for 1 or 2 seconds, and that might just be a small enough window for that newly flipped defender to yield that 5 yard window and us not have to enforce a delay a game penalty.
Yeah, it's an example of we're not looking for trouble. Another thing, another little phrase in your bag of tricks. Remember, the defender can be within 5 yards and you give the offensive player, the ball carrier, a quick whistle, but another offensive player cannot be within 5 yards of the ball carrier. So if I've got two attackmen standing next to each other and one of them picks the ball up, he is not entitled to that quick whistle until his other teammate gets within 5 yards. Oh, you got to get 5 yards away. So that's another thing you can keep in mind. And if he's, 4.5 yards and I'm trying to give my lead an extra second head start and the coach yells, well, my answer may be, coach, his partner was within 5 yards. I got to wait, and then I blow the whistle. So something to think about there.
Could I offer something here?
Yes, sir.
One of the things that I've heard of that in those situations is the term or phrase that we use in our bag of is the field is not ready.
Yes.
Because I think that if you're saying that the person isn't 5 yards away, the other team could think that you're coaching now and telling them to get 5 yards. And, maybe, so we want to try to, and you both are bringing up excellent points on that. So maybe something like the field is not ready, gives our partner extra time. Hopefully that player will do what they should, and we can go. We kind of keep ourselves out of the suit.
Much more succinct than saying, coach, the offensive player was not within 5 yards of the ball carrier. The field's not ready, coach, And then if you need to explain it to him later, you can. Really good point there. So what does this look like in a little bit of an animation here? So we got an over and back situation. So ball's in, we signal he's in. That lets the trail and everybody else know over and back is now a thing, as Greg Height likes to say. So Trey's not going to share the beer with everybody else. All right, so now we got the ball rolling up to midfield. And then you see the trail is straddling midfield. The single's going to come up to help. Ball crosses. Now we've got an over and back. You're going to blow your whistle, signal, and then the trail is immediately going to beat feet to his goal. The single has the restart, and he's going to do the restart, and then he's going to follow the ball down to his position. So that's kind of gives you a quick animation for the newer guys. We haven't done this 467 times. It kind of gives you the play-by-play there of how this works. All right. We got two more topics, I think. So deep restarts. This is an interesting one. And I like to ask the question, well, what do you mean when we say deep restarts? We got all these terms we use as officials. The first year I had no idea what X was. Like, X, there's no X back there. Why do we call it X? Or why does the coach yell Gilman whenever the goalie gets the ball? He wants him to throw it downfield. What the heck does that mean? There's a whole story behind that I won't go into this time. A deep restart. So what is that? So a deep restart is basically we're going to do a restart after a turnover. Could be an out of bounds, a non-time serving penalty, a shot, whatever. When we're clearing the other end of the field. So the ball is deep in the offensive end, but now we're going the other way. Okay. It's not up near midfield. It's not sidelines out of bounds. It could be sideline down near the cone, but it's deep down in the offensive end, and we're going the other way. I see newer officials sometimes will get a little confused over who handles the whistle and where do you want to be. So we'll talk about that. The good thing about deep restarts is we have a little bit more time on these. It's less about anticipation and really more about paying attention. But the key thing here is you want to give a good, clear signal and point the correct direction that lets your partner know which way you're going. It lets the players and coaches know. Now, here's a tip. And all of us have screwed this up. I've screwed this up. You blow the whistle, you say white, you're going the other way. And what do? You point the wrong way. Well, when you do that, this is a key thing. You want to correct the error. Blow your whistle big, tweet, 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 wave your arms, and point the correct direction. And then wait. 2 hands up if you need to. The reason you want to do that is a couple things. One, it lets your partners know, because if you point one direction and I think we're staying at the other end of the field, maybe I'm the lead, I'm going to slide back down to GLE, I'm going to get ready, and all of a sudden it's like, oh crap, I got to go the other way. Or particularly if I'm the trail transitioning to lead and I don't know this and I think we're staying at one end of the field, I'm just going to stand there. So you want to make sure you correct that error, but you're also potentially disadvantaging the teams, because the players, particularly midfielders, they're going to transition. They're going to mentally flip into, okay, now I'm in defensive mode. They may even sub off a midfielder and sub on a long pole defensive midi if they think they're about to go to defense. So you don't want to disadvantage that new defense or your partners. You want to correct that error. So just a quick tip about those deep restarts when we have some sort of turnover. Typically, the rule is the trail is going to have the deep restart. Even if the ball goes out of bounds on the far side of the field, there's an exception to that if you're a little bit higher up or in the wing area or in the alley. But I'll show you what this looks like. So typically, this is what we've got. So the trail is going to pretty much have the restarts in this whole area. Okay, and particularly if the ball is down towards the end line, that's always going to be the trail. Even if the ball goes out of bounds on the far side of the field, it's a habit. Sometimes the single may think, oh, I've got to blow the whistle. Nope. You want to get to the cone. That's your primary responsibility as single. There's the exception is if we've got a restart in this area. Now, Andy may say, oh, that's not really a deep restart. Yeah, probably not. But the ball goes out of bounds somewhere in this area and, they come in, they're north of the box. Do you push them back down? A lot of dynamic things going on here, but generally the trail is going to have that restart unless it's up in this area. Generally, the single is going to probably have the restart. But Andy, here's my question. How do you know? How do this trail and the single let each other know who's got the restart in any given situation?
Well, I think more than anything, when you look at this diagram right here, you see how relatively stretched our field is between the three of us. We have a really wide triangle, and it's one of those things that it's imperative for everyone on the crew to give a ready signal. And it goes from the lead giving a ready signal at his end of the field to then him relaying that to single side, who gives a ready signal that is then picked up by the trail, and then he knows that we're good to restart. Because you have a situation like this with a really stretched field and a lot of balls in the air, essentially, at that same time, a lot of things being juggled. You could have that lead. This could be from a broken clear that was off of a 10-man ride where everybody else is ready to play, but it's a restart out of bounds, and you have the goalie that the lead to our right in this diagram is covering, and he's out of the cage, and he's entitled to 5 seconds for a restart. The one of the worst things you could do in this situation is just assume that everyone is good to go and not have everything be taken care of in the trail's position, and him think that he's good to restart with the goalie out of the cage at the other end of the field. And then you have somebody that shoots from the trail's end of the field to an open goal at the other end of the field. And you either have to allow or disallow an open goal in a situation like that.
I wouldn't want to try to explain that to a coach.
I wouldn't want that either. That is a bag of worms or a hornet's nest that I do not want to stir. Yep. So I think it's just imperative that that the wider that our field gets is to give a ready signal, no matter how casual we think the restart may be or the situation might be, so that everyone on the field is on the same page and that we're relaying those ready signals from one to the other, and that we are good to go and that we do feel like we have a clean restart.
Yep. All right. Excellent points. All right. Last thing we're going to talk about. Yes, sir.
Hey, before we go on, I just want to kind of echo Andy's thoughts here. And really, when we go back to looking at this diagram and really kind of all over the field, whenever we're talking about going from the ready signal and everything, I always tell my pregame and everything is the single side is the quarterback here, right? Whenever we get going, your single side is the guy that's going to tell you whether we're good to go or not. Everything else is on hold until you get that ready signal from the single side. And single, you're looking at the league getting that ready signal from them. But at the end of the day, single gives you that ready signal, and you're the trail, you go.
Yep, that's a really good point. I appreciate you bringing that up, Trey, because if you think about it, the trail, he might not be able to see the lead's ready signal, particularly if I'm pointing downfield. I'm bladed. He's at the other end of the field. He might not see that, but the single can see it. Or maybe there's some players there that are screening me. Maybe I might even angle in a little bit so the trail can see it, but he might not see me because there's players, there's substitution or something going on. So that's a really good point, Trey, about the single being sort of the quarterback. He's going to have his hand up waiting so that he knows the lead's good, that other end of the field is ready, the trail's good, he's going to point, and we're going to go. All right. Offsides. This can be difficult in transition. If we're in a settled situation and I go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, oh, we got too many. I got an offsides. That's easy. But in transition, when everybody's running, you got substitutions, you got guys going back and forth over the field, it can be difficult, especially with a two-man crew. You're going to miss offsides in two-man. But a couple of tips, and the veterans certainly know this, always count forward. Second thing you want to do is put yourself on mute when you're on a webinar. I don't know who that is. All right, there we go. That might help. So you want to count forward. Little war story. Many years ago, I was doing a game Friday night under the lights, Stars Mill Macintosh. For those of you that have done those, that's a big rivalry. I'm coming down his trail, and one of the coaches, I don't know which one, yelled, "He's offsides." And so what did I do? I turned around. Big mistake. There was a boom, a crash in the middle of the field. 20 yards in front of me. I turn around, 2 players are laying on the ground. I had no idea what happened. So never, ever, ever turn around to count offsides. Always count forward. Little tip that I learned, count 3 players on each team as they cross. That is a fairly easy way to make sure you're counting properly. You already know that you've got 3 midfield or 3 attackmen and 3 defense at one end of the field. Plus, I don't ever count the goalie. You don't need to count him. You're going to have 3 midfielders in each team that cross midfield. In 2-man, the lead's got that initial offsides, but as you're coming down his trail, you should be counting. Everybody's always counting. It's kind of the rule. In 3-man, the single's got that initial offsides, but then the trail is also going to count as he comes down. One of the things that I kind of picked up on, especially if I'm the lead and the ball is crossing midfield and there's something going on in front of the singles coverage area on the far side of the field, he's focused on that. He's the on-ball official. He's looking for pushes. He's looking for, a penalty, something like that, particularly if the ball is loose or there's something going on. As the lead, I may do a quick count because I know that the single's focused on something else. So something else to think about. And as I said, everyone is always counting. And then, of course, the last thing, you want to count the offense first. Why do we do that? Andy, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, I want to say one thing first is that there used to be something that I heard from older officials when I started working games, and it was in the pregame that was you count blue and I'll count white all day.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? That is antiquated. That is irrelevant. Everyone needs to be counting everyone, but we count the offense first so that we don't have to wipe out what would otherwise have been a good goal.
Yeah.
For an offensive team having too many players on the field, and that's not a positional responsibility. That is a responsibility of everyone on the crew. That, as you said before, the ABCs of officiating are always be counting, and that falls to everyone.
Yeah.
And I usually there have been games plenty of times before that, whether or not we have been working in transition or at settled offense, that if I am bored in a game, what is the first thing I should be doing if I'm bored in officiating a game is I should count.
Yeah, good point.
It's like if you're bored and trying to go to sleep, you count sheep. If you're bored in a game, you count players.
Hopefully you won't fall asleep on the field.
Hopefully not.
Yeah.
What
are some other thoughts? Because this is just a few things here on offsides, but I think this is a challenging kind of thing. What other words of wisdom do you have for us on offsides?
I think it's one of 2 things. One is to open up when you're the lead. Oftentimes the lead gets so focused on getting to that goal line and just monitoring the goal line and the crease that they forget that you're part of a 2 or 3-man crew, and that you have split responsibilities for the entire field. And that's to open up from the goal line, to see the entire field, and to assist, especially dependent on who you're with, on your positioning, on the game situation, to try and take into account all of those things and not just be so focused on all too often leads are just worried about covering the crease, the goal line, and everything south of that. And unfortunately, there are plenty of things that happen north of that goal line at all times during a game that you need to be able to help out with.
Yeah.
In addition to that, I would say that whether you're in any situation, whether you're trail, single, or lead, is a great thing to do along with while you're counting for offsides. Is the easiest thing, at least for me in my experience, that's what I was taught, is to, when you're counting the defense, just to count and find the 2 short sticks. Then you're taking care of 2 things. You're taking care of there being 6 defensive players and you're making sure that they don't have too many long poles on the field as well.
Yep, that's another good point.
And as soon as you find those 2 short sticks on defense, then and you've gotten everyone else, then you've satisfied that responsibility in two different facets.
Yep. All right.
Which is just something I think of off the top of my head.
Sure. All right, gentlemen. Well, that's all we've got as far as thoughts on transitioning, officiating and transition. A lot to think about. Hopefully you've gotten a couple of nuggets. I'm going to open it up to questions, comments, anything, Mike, Trey, Nick, any veteran guys, any thoughts you want to have, or does anybody else have any questions or comments?
Well, I'd like to offer you guys did an excellent job.
I appreciate it.
Thank you, Nick.
Great job.
Yeah.
And then in one of your earlier slides, you had where you used 3 letters, and if you would explain what those letters were. It was 3 letters and a slash and then 3 letters. It was near the bottom of one of the earlier slides.
Bottom of one of the earlier slides. Let me scroll through here. Was it a graphic or one with some bullet points?
Bullet points, and I think it was like the last tip or some information.
Stu, I think it was when the 3 letters was like unnecessary roughness.
Right.
On a pole.
Yeah. Oh, here.
IBC, UNF.
Yeah. I got you right here. Late activity after ball is passed doesn't warrant UBC, illegal body check, IBC, or UNR. Oh, wait, here we go. Okay, I forgot to hit the share. This right here? Yeah, I'm sorry. As abbreviation for illegal body check or unnecessary roughness.
Okay.
All right. So if you think about, I've got a goalie, or maybe it's a long pole, makes that long downfield clearing pass, and then he gets checked. Well, it could be late, high, really hard, and it's illegal. It's an illegal body check, or you could call unnecessary roughness. But there's some situations where you got to give him a little love tap. He kind of shoved him. The guy was a little bit off balance. He fell down. It wasn't a hard hit. Doesn't warrant the unnecessary roughness or the illegal body check. That's when you would go with that interference. So that's what those abbreviations were.
Yeah, we're coming back to it. I was like, I can't figure out what that means. But of course now, put in context and we say it, then yeah.
No, I got you. Okay. Yep. No worries.
Thank you.
Yep. So you learned at least one thing from me, Nick.
I did.
All right. Anybody else? Any other comments, questions?
Yeah, I got
Nice job, guys. Nice job. The season's right around the corner. Remember, we are professionals. So now's the time to start getting yourself into shape. Please don't wait for the first game or the first scrimmage. We are professionals.
Thank you, sir. Somebody else had a question or comment?
Yeah, I did. I had a question about the transition and getting the 10 and the 20 count. So if we transition a goalie makes a save, the trail has the 4 count for the goalie out of crease, and then it's 20 seconds to get across midfield, right?
Correct. So go ahead, finish your question.
So I saw somewhere that said that the new lead had the initial 10 count.
Yep.
So that's the 10 count once the ball has crossed midfield after the first 20 seconds, right?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay.
So basically,
And that's on a 2-man crew, not a 3-man crew.
Yeah, you need to know if you're 2-man or 3-man.
Yeah. So basically what will happen is, so the goalie makes the save. He said, and you'll hear them yell clear. They don't always yell it, but the goalie makes the save. The lead is now the new trail. And in 2-man, you're going to do 2 things simultaneously. Well, actually, you're going to do 3 things. You're going to raise your hand and give a reset, a twirl with your finger, which is a reset signal. lets the lead, you got to reset, we're going the other way. You're going to flip your 20-second timer on, and you're going to start your 4-second count. Now, Greg Height probably told you in the training you did in the fall that your hand goes up, it's a reset, you flip your timer on, and then when you come down, that's been about a second. So that first visual count would then be 2, 3, 4, and then the goalie's either got to carry or pass the ball out of the crease. Okay. So your trail has that 20-second count. When the ball crosses the field, crosses midfield, then the lead will start a visual 10-second count. Whoops, a little bit too fast there. The lead will start a visual 10-second count until they get the ball into the box.
Okay, so that's kind of where my main question arises, right? Because like if the lead is supposed to stay ahead of the play, right, and like right here where the video is, like the lead should kind of already be down closer towards GLE, at least top of the box, right? So what, like, is there some mechanic to let the lead know that the trail should do to let the lead know that, hey, the ball has crossed midfield?
No, the lead's going to watch it. He's watching the ball too. He's got to know he's going to stay ahead of that play. This is just kind of a basic example in a real game and a 2-man. I almost in a live ball transition where the goalie makes the save or the defense picks the ball up after, knocking out of somebody's stick, I'm running. I'm not going to stop at midfield. If the ball is here, I'm probably already going to be down below the restraining line. Okay. I'm not going to be I'm not going to be hanging around here. This is just a kind of a general example to show you. In the real world, you're going to most likely be down way past this.
Okay, but then it's the new lead's responsibility to see when the ball has crossed midfield.
Yes,
that's kind of something I kind of struggle to see. Like just like given the angle, I'm like, I'm not sure if the ball has crossed midfield or not to start my 10 count.
Yeah, and that's where cones help, particularly that far side cone. You may not get it precisely, not a big deal. Start your 10-second count when you're sure that he's crossed midfield. And most often they're going to be running. They're not going to stop and hang around here. And you're going to be like, I can't see if he touched across the line. They're running. They're sprinting down towards the other end of the field. Somebody was going to say something.
And Fabian, I want to add to that, with regards to where you're positioning, let the guys clearing the ball dictate. We talked about anticipation at the beginning. So if they're bringing the ball up slowly and you're at the midline, the trail will eventually start to catch up to you and you can move quicker. You can move down sooner rather than later. But if they're bringing the ball up lickety split and you stopped at that cone, you still got to go with that play in the long run. So with regards on that 2-man crew, let the players clearing the ball dictate where you're going to be and anticipate. If it's a slow clear, you've got a little bit more time in your hands. If it's a fast clear, you've got to stay ahead of the play. And then Stuart's right. You help use that cone, depending which side of the field you're on, but use that cone. And better to be late starting your 10-second count than early.
Okay.
Yep, that's also a very good point.
And I would say along with that, Fabian, it's a great question. One, if you're not comfortable with the ball transitioning across midfield, that's the type of thing that you should tell to your partner in your pregame. And you should ask him for help. And if that's the case, then you can implement something like him dropping an arm out to his right when the ball has crossed. If you can't see that or you're not sure when it's crossed. The other thing that I wanted to throw in there is that you have to make sure, though, that to start the 10-second count, it's offensive possession of the ball. It's not when the ball crosses. It's possession inside of that offensive zone that begins the 10-second count.
Okay.
And Fabian, also the clock may help you. If you can get the game clock time in your mind and start working timing, that might help you also. In case you have a question or somebody says he didn't get there, and you say, well, that play started at this time, and you may be able to use that to help.
And remember, they have the right to go back over the line and come back as long as they're within that 10 seconds.
Yes.
I'm sorry, you said they can, right?
Yeah. So basically the way it works
until they
is
touch the box.
correct. So if he crosses midfield, and you start your your visual 10-second count, and he goes back over midfield, that's fine.
Yeah.
He still has to make it into the box to end that 10-second count, and then you're going to point up and down and say he's in. Let your partner know that he's in the box. Now, if they go across midfield or the ball goes across, now you got an over and back situation.
Yeah, I got that.
Okay. All right. Any other questions, comments?
Hey, Stu, this is James. I have a question for you.
Yes, sir.
Andy was talking about what if the pass goes across the midline and the pass is dropped on the other side? Do you start your 10-second or do you wait till they get possession?
That's a great question. What do you think?
I say it was I say you don't start it because it's not a possession on the opposite side of the line. So on the opposite side. So until that possession happens, that's when you count 10.
Yep, you are correct, sir. The ball has to be in possession. So you'll see he's running up, he gets to the 45-yard line, the ball gets checked, it rolls across midfield. I don't start a 10-second count until that offensive team gains possession of the ball.
I think what he's asking is if they do gain possession and they drop it, does it start? Well, it's already started because he had possession. He can drop it, go back over the line, and come back, but he's got to get back in within 10 seconds.
No. I was saying if they passed it, if they're on the if they're on their 20 and they pass it, but it's never possessed. They pass it past midfield. It was never possessed. The guy drops it. He never catches it. Do we start the 10? And I say we don't start the 10 at that point.
That is correct.
He's got to possess it. Yeah.
Yeah, he's got to have it in possession. Now, the one thing you guys know this, that rule applies for the 10-second count to start it, but it doesn't apply to stop it. As long as the ball goes into the box, it can go in loose. That will end the 10-second count. So if he's crossed the midfield, you start your 10-second count, the ball gets checked out of his stick, but it rolls into the box, into the restraining area, then you're going to end the 10-second count. But it's got to touch in the ground. Now, if it flies over the corner and lands in the alley, 10-second count keeps going. Good question. Anything else? All right.
Can I just add one thing here?
Yes, sir.
Hey, so first of all, Stu, Andy, great job tonight. Appreciate you guys walking through everything tonight. I think you guys did a great job.
Thank you, Trey.
Thank you. Just want to throw out a couple of things here. Guys, there are a ton of nuances that as you can see, between the 2-man, the 3-man, and as far as being on the same crew and working together and just kind of all being aware of what's going on the field. And I think that really comes down to knowing your partners and getting to know them through a good pre-game. So, I encourage you guys to touch base as much as you can throughout the season. And with that, I'm going to leave a little selfish plug here. Next week, Herbert and I are going to cover pregame and communication and everything else. So hopefully we can see you guys next Thursday and do as good a job as Stu and Andy has done here tonight.
I appreciate it. That's a good plug.
I look forward to it, Trey.
Yeah. And one thing else, I'm going to go ahead and end the recording.